For a founder who is listening who wants to align their business practices with their values, can you talk a little bit about how you started to get to the place where you landed on, okay, this is going to be our starting point and this is what we're working toward?
I would say a couple things.
Today's guest is Alex Saingchin, co-founder of Just Futures, a community-owned investment firm reshaping finance for social justice. With decades of experience in movement building and impact strategy, he's helping redefine how capital serves communities.
Just Futures is 55% owned by 5 BIPOC-led nonprofit organizations. I love that because it means the majority of the profits are flowing back to social movements rather than to your own pockets. Why you structured Just Futures this way?
It was really just an idea to help middle-aged movement activists sleep a little bit better at night when saving for retirement. It was this idea that folks trusted us to walk the talk, and so how do we do that differently?
You're managing $20 million in loans that are at 0% interest, and most people in finance would say that is not sustainable or that it is irresponsible. So how do you respond to that? And what have you learned about what fiduciary responsibility really means when you truly step outside of the traditional models instead of just kind of slapping impact on them and then doing the exact same thing?
The central question that we have for any investor is,
Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, where real stories about bold shifts illuminate how we can create a new economy. I'm your host, Rachel Bernier Green, social entrepreneur, activist, and founder of EJ Consortium, a finance consulting firm designed to help purposeful businesses change the world. Today's guest is Rewriting the Rules of Finance from Quito, Ecuador. Alex Saingchin is co-founder of Just Futures, an investment firm with a radical structure. 55% owned by 5 BIPOC-led nonprofits, flipping traditional wealth extraction completely on its head. With 25 years moving from Big Five consulting to impact law to philanthropy leadership, Alex has built a $20 million fund offering 0% interest loans and just launched values-aligned retirement plans for nonprofits and social enterprises. But perhaps his boldest move was closing a successful family business to save his relationships and relocating to South America to understand extraction firsthand. This is someone who walks the talk on balancing purpose and profit. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift.
thanks so much, Rachel. Super, super excited to be here.
Yes, and I've been super excited just for our listeners who are, to give them some additional context, I had the opportunity to meet some of your colleagues at I believe it was the U.S. Federation of Workers Co-ops conference last year. And then since that time, our firm actually became a client of Just Futures for our retirement plan.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been super, super excited to work with you and the Federation as well.
Oh, yes. It was one of the highlights of my time building this company was when we were looking for a retirement plan and came across Just Futures and the
Mm.
values alignment. I love when things fall into place that way.
Right on, right on.
So let's talk about the time you spent climbing the corporate ladder. And while you were climbing the corporate ladder, you were writing, on the side about diversity issues. And then 9/11 happened. You gave 2 days notice and made a pivot. So kind of walk us through that moment. What made you willing to walk away from that type of financial security? And what did that decision cost you or give you?
Yeah, I would say right off the bat, it gave me liberation and it gave me freedom,
Mm.
opportunities to build a very different kind of community than I had experienced before. I'll say as background, I grew up very, very conservative. My mother was born in Cuba and was a refugee from the Cuban Revolution in the 60s. My father was an economic refugee from Thailand, who him and his family knew severe, severe hunger. And so when they met in the US and eventually had me, I embodied their hopes and dreams of, not just being comfortable, but
Yeah,
being rich.
thriving.
Yeah. But, as a Chinese Cuban Thai person, I present East Asian culturally. I'm more Cuban American, I would say. But I went through my own experiences of, racism, awareness, learning, and was really influencing college as well as getting involved with student organizing and meeting other folks who were going through those same sort of introspective journeys. So when ultimately I went to a Big Five firm because I was a business major. And
Can you explain what a Big Five firm is for those
yeah,
listeners who
it's
might?
one of the very, very large. I'll say back then it was Big Five. From now it's four, but
Yes.
consulting and accounting firms that dominate.
So we
Uh,
have that in common.
yeah, the financial services accounting industry and consulting specifically. And yeah, I won't name the firm, but I
Might
got
avoid
very
naming my
involved.
Big Four firms as well.
But yeah, I got really involved with diversity initiatives, things like that at the firm. They made me editor of the newsletter, right? And I
That's good.
thought, thank you. I thought in a lot of ways this was going to be a pathway for social change, trying to make change inside corporate.
Mm,
And really, as you mentioned, 9/11 really made me realize how much of a farce or a
mm,
fanciful idea that was for a 22, 23-year-old person to make big change within a 60,000 person corporate firm that was transitioning
yeah,
to a company. And so I started to get centered. Folks wanted to look at my materials. Some folks were feeling their feathers ruffled by the things I was saying in terms
yeah,
the discrimination and racism that was going on in 9/11. Folks
right.
who appeared Arab, Middle Eastern, South Asian were getting rounded up
Yeah,
by their race, deported, whole communities disappearing, and then, you know, lots of money going down to New York City, but lots of folks still falling through the cracks, people of
yeah,
color, immigrants. So it became obvious almost immediately that the ideas and notions I had of trying to make change in light of a massive crisis and a disaster that the US was experiencing just wasn't going to work out. So it was super clear to me that I had to do something else.
So, can you talk about how your family, because you have kind of mentioned that their hopes and dreams in many ways were resting on you. How did they react when you decided to walk away from, because you kind of made it, for a
Yeah.
lot of people, that's the pinnacle. Those are the biggest accounting and consulting firms like in the world.
Yeah. It was tough. It
Yeah.
was very tough. Overall, they were supportive. They saw that I was clearly 100% in line with this decision that I needed to do. And I think at that point, 22, 23 years old, they started to realize as a firstborn too, that there was only so much they could do to shift and influence me at that point in time. So I feel very blessed that when I had the conversation, it was like, okay, what do you need from us? And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, at that point, I thought I had to go to graduate school, which I eventually did to pursue a policy degree and a law degree. But it was this idea of like, yeah, I need to step away. And I think I need to go to graduate school so I can work in nonprofit. And that means I would have to take some standardized tests. And can y'all support me for a few months until I get back onto my feet? And mind you, of course, I had okay amount of money because I was working for a Big Five.
Right.
It was a both and situation. But yeah, it was a scary conversation for me to open up, let's be honest. But
Yeah.
ultimately it worked out, and my family generally has leaned into that this is my calling. This is the work. Money is definitely not everything, right? It's certainly very important, but our relationships with family, with community, and ultimately with ourselves
Yes.
is most important. So just feeling very, very blessed for the level of support that I received from my family.
I love that.
Grudgingly support. Let's put it.
I'm a fellow firstborn. So yeah, that part resonates with me very deeply, especially having a similar shift where when I left the Big Four the first time, then I went to grad school, and then I ended up going back. I don't know why I boomeranged, but back to Just Futures. One of
Loans,
the things,
maybe.
well, yeah, that actually had a lot to do with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so Just Futures is 55% owned by 5 BIPOC-led nonprofit organizations. So I love that because it means the majority of the profits are flowing back to social movements rather than to your own pockets. So for listeners who are building their own businesses, can you walk us through why you structured Just Futures this way?
Yeah, I mean, when the idea for Just Futures was first born, it was really just an idea to help middle-aged movement activists sleep a little bit better at night when saving for retirement, right? And so we went out
Mm.
and we did a listening tour of over 200 social justice groups across the country, led by people of color, for people of color. And they told us three big things, right? One, they really resonated with this idea of a values-driven retirement plan, but
Mhm.
rooted in what we call like new economy, just transition, right?
Yes.
So they want to invest in, enterprise not just run by Black and brown people, but owned by Black and brown people.
Yes.
Investing in worker-owned co-ops or real affordable housing like community land trusts, right? But they were skeptical that something like that existed. Two, folks were receiving, 7, 8-figure sums from Jeff Bezos and Mackenzie Scott, sitting on the money in
Mhm.
cash. Why? Third aha. Folks fundamentally didn't trust the existing asset management industry, which
Yeah.
is 98.6% controlled by white men, to not greenwash the money. So they asked us if we would do that. So that's where we have we have two lines of business. One is retirement and the other one is asset management, which includes fund hosting. But really, Rachel, we didn't just want to be another asset manager with more melanin or more. And on our team, the
Yeah.
skepticism that we heard from community around skepticism of finance, its impact on communities, its, preference and dominance of profit first, right?
Mhm.
So it was this idea that folks trusted us to walk the talk. And so how do we do that differently? And
Right.
really, it's around flipping that 98.6% dynamic on its head. Rather than working with folks, right, who already have money and
Yes.
making ourselves rich at the same time, that just reinforces the racial wealth gap, right?
Right.
And, reinforces the fact that people of color and women are not getting the resources they need to create really, really awesome social enterprises. So rather than just be another cog in this big financial, machinery, we want to be an example, a model for how regeneration, redistribution, some might even say reparations,
Yes.
right, should
This
occur.
is actually a shift in power.
Right. And likewise, just saying, hey, rather than us getting the profits, etc., we should share it with community.
Yeah.
Let them, decide what to do with it. How they reinvest in their communities, and that also means how to keep guiding Just Futures as a purpose-driven vehicle in
Yes.
the financial system, because we could say that, commas and zeros are very, very sexy for folks. We maintain that community governance, community focus of the company so that we
Yeah.
continue to, invest for better and innovate for better. So that's why really it's about rooting ourselves wholly in community.
And so one of the things that I'm loving about this is that a lot of our listeners, often I find when I go out and I'm, giving workshops or things, I will say something about, how you can structure your business in a specific way to shift power or to build legacy or magnify impact. And people say, but is there a way that I can do that? So can you tell me a little bit about the legal structure of Just Futures and kind of why you landed on that legal structure? And then
Sure.
maybe kind of the role that talk a little bit more about the role that these nonprofit organizations actually play when it comes to decision making.
Yeah, yeah. So we're a public benefit corporation registered in Delaware, and so what that means is that we are obligated to not only consider what typical corporations maximize, which is shareholder value, we think about stakeholder value. Stakeholders, we mean our workers, our employees, contractors, supply chain, right? And of course, the community. right? And when we say the community, we mean we're a national organization. We mean everybody, right? And especially low-income communities of color as a
Yeah.
organization focused, right, on addressing the racial wealth gap and lifting up all boats. And so, yeah, that was something that was really, really obvious to us is how do you again concretize values, concretize
Mhm.
community in our
Yeah.
corporate form, which is what ultimately, when it comes to regulation, or even litigation, that's what ultimately we're being held accountable to. I'll say, it's exciting for us to be a part of what I would say is a movement of
Yeah.
folks who are really thinking about different ways of incorporating or different ways of structuring their work. So we're part of a group of folks who are starting to evangelize what we call community wealth charters, right? So
Yes.
amazing, amazing folks who are thinking about enterprises in a very different way, want to give back to community, right? But do so in a really, really powerful and meaningful way, not just
Yes.
market, right? And so we're super excited that we're part of a little growing, ecosystem of folks who have adopted community wealth charters where they're saying, whether they're structured as a public benefit corporation, they could just be a regular LLC, a C corp, right? Not necessarily with the PB in front of
Hmm.
it, right? But saying, yeah, we're going to give, for example, 30% of our revenue to a foundation, right? That is doing community work, that is redistributing our profits back into the community. That's one big element of what we call community wealth charters. Another way is, how to think about their exits. So, small
Yes.
business owners, right? Enterprises, they've been, hard at work building really great values aligned businesses, and it's time for retirement, right? Or they're tired rather than sell
Yeah.
to a private equity company or somebody else who will, rebrand the whole thing and toss the values out. Why not
Right.
think about an exit to your workers, right? To
Yes.
make it an ESOP or a worker-owned cooperative conversion. Why not
Yes.
exit to community, right? And
Yeah.
so it could still be run by the workers, but the community, meaning regular people, neighbors, businesses right next door,
Yeah.
could own the business and keep it the way it is and keep it relevant to the community
Yes.
rather
Serving
than
the
do
needs
what
of those
typical.
people in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than, with private equity, it's all again about maximizing their ownership
Extraction.
value and extraction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been wonderful. You asked about how does it work, right? So I'll say just a little correction. Right now they're at 30%
Okay.
ownership, and eventually once we become profitable and debt free, they'll get to the 55%. And
Okay.
that, I think,
Awesome.
addresses maybe some of the inquiry that you have on your podcast around how do you balance values with the business, right?
Yes.
And so,
We
uh,
don't have to get there all at once.
yeah,
It's very possible to have transition plans.
exactly, exactly, and that's the way we think about it, right? We are blessed that we have, folks on our staff with decades of financial service experience, right? And so to
Yes.
help, they're building our retirement products, our asset management products, right? Creating these awesome, 0% loan funds, things like that. Highly, highly technical. So
Yes.
this idea, this notion of giving community automatic majority or a 100% control of a financial concern, right? Is
It's
challenging.
romantic,
Yeah.
but maybe not realistic.
Right. Well, how do we take the time? So we start with that intentionality, 30%, right? We mean this,
Yes.
not just 1% for a small cause. This is about real power,
Yes.
real influence, but then also providing the tools, the training, the education on the way so that they can eventually take 55% ownership. So they
Yes.
can, work deeply in the company and understand the myriad challenges and contradictions that we're constantly dealing with and trying to
Right.
values different retirement plan. But that's the way we think about it as a march towards majority ownership. And so right now, in terms of what they actually have operationally, right, we're talking about 30% community control across ownership, governance, and management. So 30% equity, right?
Yeah.
30% representation on our board, that's governance, and
Mm-hmm.
30% representation on our investment committee, which reviews and looks at the investment offerings that we provide to our clients. And that is what we
Yes.
call more closer to day-to-day management. So really, this is not window dressing. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of resources
Yes.
on our part. We think it's part of our overall mission, right? To democratize finance, to democratize
Yes.
our economy away from a privileged few. And at the same time, we think this is going to bear massive dividends long term in terms of a long-standing organization, financial organization that is responsive and accountable to community needs.
I love that. Thank you for breaking down how the community involvement, that it is not, window dressing, as you said, that it is meaningful, it is layered, and it is responsible, and that you have a plan because you said, this is where we want to be, and you started with something meaningful, and then have a plan in place to get there. So I want to go back to one of the things you mentioned about the loan funds, because you're managing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like $20 million in loans that are at 0% interest.
About,
Interest.
yeah.
So you're centering borrowers' well-being over lender protection. And most people in finance, even in impact finance, would say that that is not sustainable or that it is irresponsible. So how do you respond to that? And what have you learned about what fiduciary responsibility really means when you truly step outside of the traditional models instead of just kind of slapping impact on them and then doing the exact same thing?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we would say that traditional finance folks think it's irresponsible, think it's unsustainable because they're prioritizing the accumulation of wealth. Central question that we have for any investor is what is enough? Person, what is enough? It's a different answer depending on your financial status. So,
Yeah.
as you know, Rachel, we do work with workers, regular folks, right?
Yes.
Or nonprofit, whether they're program folks, cleaning staff, the receptionists, etc. Right? We believe that that answer to what is enough for those folks is very different. We think that they have a right to accumulate because they haven't had anything,
Right.
right? Then the question is,
Such an
to
important distinction.
to what end, right? And there's this merging conversation of should a billionaire even exist?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a very, very, for regular people, we haven't quite figured that question out. But like, if I were to give you a number, what is enough? Do you know? But I think it's a very personal question because people's financial situation, their trauma, their history, all these
Yeah.
different things play into that. Now let's flip that sort of dynamic. When we're talking about those traditional financial folks who say this is unsustainable and whatnot, I would ask, well, how much money is in their bank account, right? If you're talking about folks who are millionaires, billionaires, and many of the clients that we're working with are institutions, foundations, right? Family office. That question of what is enough is radically different. And we would say
Yes.
many of these folks have more than enough. So now we create these funds, going back to the funds, right? Because we're trying to close the racial wealth gap. We're working with
Yes.
values-aligned investors who say there's a serious problem in our society. The wealthiest decile in the United States owns 90% of the wealth,
Right.
and that capital is 80% of the money flowing through Wall Street. And
And that in and of itself is unsustainable.
exactly, we're leading to, you know, crazy market cycles,
Mm-hmm.
big bubbles forming as we
Absolutely.
speak, because the richest of folks are just piling on to the sexiest of things, but the value isn't there. So
Right.
eventually, poof. Again, how do we flip
Yes.
the dynamic? So if you have more than enough and you are genuinely concerned about the climate crisis, you are genuinely concerned about the racial wealth gap,
Right.
then playing the status quo game of investing in companies that are getting richer at the hands of the environment, workers, right? Democracy, ethical issues is just simply not going to work. Again, if you're
Right.
authentically concerned about the wealth gap and the climate
Yeah.
crisis, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to take a radically different approach. The concentration of wealth is up here. We need to bring it down here. And that's where taking something like a just transition integrated capital fund, which is what you're referring to,
Yes.
which is working with investors and saying, hey, you already take a lot of risk already to maximize your return. What if you
Yeah.
took a lot of risk to maximize community impact? And so that
Yeah.
rather than aiming for 14, 15, 20% venture capital returns, right? So if folks are seriously and genuinely concerned about closing the racial wealth gap, addressing the climate crisis, they really need to move away from traditional status quo investment practices. And
Yeah.
so folks are taking already inordinate amount of risk to maximize returns, whether they're working with venture capital funds and looking for a 100x multiple
Yeah.
within 4 years, right? Or investing in hedge funds and an absolute returns portfolio. Well, we think about it, instead of doing a venture capital play or a hedge play, why don't you focus on absolute impact, right? Taking
I
risks for
can
community.
imagine that some rooms, the questions that you're asking, that there are some rooms that I find myself in quite frequently where I feel like asking these questions would just silence the entire room.
Yeah. And I think we need to be, talking about this
Absolutely.
more and more. The last 50 years of neoliberalism really trust the corporate form, you know, waves of privatization, deregulation. But this idea is like, we're going to make all this money and then give 5% of away
Yeah.
and try to make
Hands off.
change. It's not working.
It is not.
Inequality is getting wider.
Yes.
We're having more, societal conflict, right?
Yeah.
The separation of communities and
Yeah.
isolation of individuals, right? And we
Absolutely.
really need to be moving towards this idea of interdependence.
Yes.
We think redistribution is important, right?
Yeah.
Taking or not taking, but encouraging those who have way more than enough to give back to those, but rather, and I love Rachel, your podcast, that's important, but that's not going to save us. It's
Right.
going to get us to maybe some level of a balance, and then we need to start thinking about pre-distribution versus
Right.
distribution. Having enterprises, economic structures where
Yes.
equity is already built in, values are already built in.
Right.
So we're not exacerbating the problem, but we're going towards regeneration, right? To
Yes.
creating a society that, is able to provide us with, a healthy home,
Yes.
water, food, energy so we can heat and cool our homes, and
Right.
ultimately to give us the space to have rich relationships with our family, our friends, and our
Yes.
community, not be tearing us apart and focusing just on bare meager minimums of sustenance.
Right. I mean, it goes, back to this is like psychology 101, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That when we talk about a lot of the issues that we're having in society, the increasing division and all these things that you're describing, you can't just slap a patch on that and make people get along. When people are struggling to survive,
That's right. That's
you
right.
can't get to a level of self-actualization where you start thinking about your neighbor with empathy.
Yeah, I mean and for us that's really why we do this work is how do we
Yeah.
change the fabric in which we relate to each other,
Yes.
right? Rather than, just looking out for our own, seeing the interdependence as a way for shared and common liberation, right? And prosperity.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love the word choice of liberation. And also that have said different times that, this alone won't save us or this alone won't save us. But that doesn't mean that it's not work that we should not be doing. We just have to recognize that it is a part of a larger puzzle. And you've said before that there is a fundamental contradiction in being an investment organization that's trying to build justice within capitalism. And you're also pretty clear eyed that this transformation probably won't happen in your lifetime. So, can you tell me about how do you keep doing this work and what keeps you going when the system is essentially designed to resist exactly what we're both trying to build?
Yeah. Folks like to say that it took, I guess we're in 2025, it took 550 years to get to late stage capitalism.
Yeah,
It will take another 500 years for us to undo it and create the economic system that cherishes and and regenerates all. That's what I have in mind, and what our team has in mind is that um, it takes a movement. It
right.
us as one piece of a larger and growing ecosystem to keep pushing, to
Yeah,
keep innovating, right? And to keep talking and pushing these ideas with other folks so that ultimately the conversations that we're starting to have are meaningfully different on these questions
right.
on what is enough, right? And how do we create an economic system that's better for all? We are very transparent that the work that we do isn't quite there yet as that sort of North
Yeah,
right? We're working with this financial system that we have to work with ETFs, exchange traded funds, and they're created oftentimes by the same folks that are railing against.
yeah,
But we're hope that, with our deep connections with community, the fact that we're always innovating, that we can choose the types of investments that are better for people and planet, not
yes.
just for the retirement workers, but also for our larger asset management
Yeah,
institutional clients, right? The work that we do on the retirement side, right? It's, customizable. We have screens that touch over 70 different issue areas. We think of ourselves
right.
intersectional, right? But,
Love it.
if gender justice is something that you care about the most, the environment, things like that, you will see your values in our portfolios. Two, we try to make it really easy and turnkey so that folks, HR operators, finance folks,
Hmm.
will see their lives significantly less burden because this is all automated, online, etc. And last,
Yes.
for regular people, it's about, financial performance and then enabling them to reach their financial goals. Why am I saying all this? What we're trying to do is make values aligned investing not so scary, right?
Yes.
Because the people are always saying, "Oh, I'm going to lose money," things like that. But no, by actually creating these products, showing that they're successful, little by
Hmm.
little, we can demystify the connection between values and investing. And
Yes.
not stopping there. So we do an annual refresh, right? Where we're seeing, are these investments not only performing financial, which is what we're required to do, but do they live up to the values that our
Hmm.
clients signed up for? That we
Right.
want, right? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And sometimes there's a better product that we can include to improve it. And the last thing that we do is really, really significant research. So um,
Yes.
our ultimate North Star is to try to help regular people, workers, invest directly in that regenerative economy. So, like
Yeah.
funds like the Just Transition Integrated Capital Fund that you talked about, 0%,
Right.
patient capital over 10 years. Those are in the private markets, right? Which is a little bit
Hmm.
more difficult to platform in retirement plans. But what are the different ways that we can do that for a JTIC fund on retirement plans? That's
Hmm.
ongoing research that we do. I'm personally responsible for it. And it's
Okay.
this idea that we just never stop. And so why do we do this? Because we know it's a long-term game. We know
Yes.
we're part of an ecosystem. We talk to a lot of friends and allies who give us advice, collaborate, etc. Again, that hope is, how do you make this less scary,
Yes.
right? So that people can can hold on to it and say, yeah, I want more of this.
Yes. That goes a long way. And, for founders listening, I know that sometimes it can seem like listening to your story, it can seem like you just masterfully came up with the line between what was, figuring out where the line was between perfect and practical.
Yeah.
But for a founder who is listening, who wants to align their business practices with their values, can you talk a little bit about how you started? To get to the place where you landed on, okay, this is going to be our starting point, and this is what we're working toward. Kind of what went on behind the scenes to get there.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. It's being adaptable and really a mantra that we say is being like water. The water will fill the vessel in which it's in. We knew we had a North Star. The North Stars had to make folks, how do you help folks sleep a little bit better at night, right? When saving for retirement. And we also knew that the North Star was, private market investments on a retirement plan. But then
Yeah.
once the research started happening, whether it's legal, operational, right, financial, you start to realize, and I didn't come from a finance background, neither did our co-founder, Steve Choi. And so we did a lot of Google research, internet research, and started to talk to a lot of folks. And then you start to realize our vision of going from 0 to 60 in like 2 years just wasn't gonna happen. But that there was still a gap,
Yes.
right, in the landscape for a people of color-led, community-owned investment advisor focus on retirement. So in terms of,
Yes.
thinking about the landscape scan, the value proposition of the business, knowing that there was a niche there that we could fill and are filling, right? And
Yes.
then starting to break it down once we started talking to different lawyers, right? Other entrepreneurs, our funder advisors, etc. And I come from a background in nonprofit where we're always fundraising,
Yes.
right? But having advisors to say, think big, but chop it up into
Yes.
manageable bites, right? And
I spend so much time working with clients on that we
yeah,
we have to have a parking lot for all of the big ideas. And then we need to chunk them out and figure out what we can sprint toward piece by piece by piece.
exactly.
Otherwise, you don't make progress.
Yeah. And you can be overwhelmed with the paralysis of how do
Oh,
I get to
absolutely.
60 when really you need to start the car first.
Right.
Right. Um, and
So real.
breaking it down and same thing with the fundraising, right? Like thinking, okay, what do we need to get to the next step?
Yes.
Right? Whether it's your MVP, a growth product, your different KPIs.
Yes.
And then again, it's all not linear. And so we started off with a retirement plan. We thought we were going to have to hire engineers and build out all this back office. We actually found third party,
Mhm.
providers who will help do just that. We wanted to create this private fund that connects to the retirement plan. Well, that hits several different regulations and different capital
Yeah.
rights. So we start with an MVP, which is, in public markets, etc.
Yeah.
All kinds of different issues, Rachel, have come our way, but it's a idea of like, chopping up into different, bite-sized components, raising the money in that way. So we really adopted the VC style of rounds,
Mhm.
money for, a year to 2 years of operations,
Yeah.
working on the stuff, then opening a raise, another raise again. And yeah, just being super open to different formulations. And part of that work was also adding a business line. So Rachel, we originally
Yeah.
going to be focused on retirement, and we still do. At the same time, we want to keep our costs affordable. And
Right.
so we realized, wow, if we only focus on retirement, our line to profitability would have been a lot longer, would have been a lot longer
Mhm.
than it is now that we added a couple other additional impact lines that, again, still connect to our North Star and still rely on competencies
Yes.
from, our core line of business, which is
So tell me about the different offerings that you currently have. So then our, listeners,
Yeah, yeah.
if they're wondering, like, can I work with Just Futures?
Oh, yeah.
The current product lines.
I'd love to do that. So for the three, we have over 160 clients total and are working with close to 70 to 75 million across the different lines of business. So with retirement, it's, a turnkey, it's a turnkey solution that allows you to customize to your values and really big emphasis on financial performance because we're talking about regular people's money. So whether you're
Right.
a small business, a nonprofit, independent contractor, we have a 401k, 403b, or an IRA product for you, right, along the different things. And again, it's screened from a community lens with over 70
Yes.
different issue metrics, right? Workers' rights, prison, the prison industrial complex,
Yes.
gender justice, things like that. They're all encompassed there. And the idea being, how do we make it easy for workers to save a bit better alongside their values? If you're an institution, and again, it could be an enterprise and you're killing it, which is awesome, right? And you have some reserves that you need to manage. If you're a foundation, you have an endowment, right? And you want to manage, we do that. So soups and nuts from public market equities and fixed income bonds to private market and our heart community investments. We
Yes.
do all of that. And the idea being is we help institutions align their money with their values. So with
Yes.
profits, right? We work with small nonprofits who are working on water scarcity issues in the Central Valley, right? And they have a couple $1 million in reserves. And how do we invest that in a way that keeps the money safe, right?
Yes.
So that they can continue their operations. Really hard right now because of all the assaults by the federal government against nonprofits, right? And also,
Especially doing that kind of work.
yeah, how do you earn a little bit of yield as well, right? A little bit, but again, in the values aligned way so that folks are investing not in places that are extracting from land, from water, right? But actually are thinking about water infrastructure, let's say in this case in California, right? Thinking about water access issues. So that's the
Yeah.
second line of impact for institutions. And then the third, which we've talked about a few times, is supporting impact funds. So working with visionary community leaders, right? They can
Yes.
raise capital. They're accountable to community, right? And they want to deploy capital in a very different way, patient and affordable, right? But they don't necessarily know, or should they learn how to run an investment fund.
Right.
We do all of that work. We all do the back office doodads, treasury management, valuation, financial reporting, all those different things. The idea being is how do we provide the investment infrastructure here that allows, mission-driven individuals, institutions, or fund builders
Yeah.
to march forward and create that regenerative economy.
Yes. And so one thing I would love to have you dig into a little bit is, so it's one thing to, invest aligned with your values, but can you talk about what the value proposition, the economic power is if we have enough companies who are investing in values-driven funds versus in conventional funds? Like, how can that shift the landscape?
Yeah. Finance controls everything. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
The largest asset managers in the world, State Street, BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, they owned practically every single company in the world, if not the United States, and their voting power, their shareholder
That part.
voting power is
Yes.
what that means is that every year companies put forward resolutions to try to improve their business practices, right? Make themselves more efficient. And in our case, for purpose of this conversation, hold them more accountable to democracy, to
Yeah.
community, to their workers. So these are things like, establishing, better wage standards, right? Thinking about your supply chain and ensuring that conflict minerals are part of it, or strengthening sexual discrimination laws. And then repeatedly, these large asset managers continually to vote down progressive proposals, right, to
Right.
improve corporate America. Who owns these companies? We do. right? But oftentimes, regular people have a hands-off, and institutions have a hands-off approach. By shifting ownership of these companies, right, or being more active owners, we can dilute their power over the rest of the economy, or at a
Yes.
minimum, if we're playing an active shareholder role, influence them to actually vote yes on these
Yes.
proposals and things like that. This is a long-term play, but ultimately, you know, we in social movements, I would say, spend a lot of work in the policy arena, right? Trying to
Yeah.
pass progressive legislation, right? Or enact progressive regs, right? We also play in the political arena to try to elect more progressive candidates. But I
Yes.
think I would contend that the attention that our movements have played to the intersection of politics and the economy, the political economy, needs a
Yes.
lot of work. And that's the work that we're trying to do at Just Futures, right? There's over $130 trillion flowing through Wall Street.
Right.
Most 99.99% of it is flowing into extractive industries. If we
Yeah.
take control of our own money, right? And there's $33 trillion flowing in the retirement industry alone, then we can start to chart a course for a better economy, to push those
Yes.
that we own to be better for their workers, communities, stakeholders, etc. And a lot of these issues around the accumulation of wealth, damaging environments, the planet, right? Paying workers pennies, things like
Yes.
that. We can then have the power to shift that to emphasize the values that we care about. And so that's our long-term goal. Right. But again, we're trying to make this
Yes.
real. We're trying to make this connection between politics, the economy, the political economy,
Yes.
right? They cannot be two separate things.
They cannot. And I love that you have talked about the relationship between, we have to simultaneously build while we are dismantling harmful systems, but we can't just, dismantle things. We can't just talk about it. We also need to do the building part. And that goes both from the political perspective and from the economic perspective. I was actually on a call last night. I'm a member of the Working Families Party,
Oh,
and we
right,
were
right.
having this conversation where we were talking about what it takes to shift political power. And as you were describing what it takes to shift economic power, the parallels, they just abound. And so it is really cool that you are taking such a holistic approach to this. And so you talk a lot about moving, from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And I know regenerative economy is a term that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it basically means, one that does not take or extract from people on the planet. So for listeners who have not thought about their business in those terms, can you talk about how you know if your business model is extractive or regenerative? Kind of what are the telltale signs?
Yeah, let me maybe first give Just Futures example of how we think about that, and then I can try to make an
Absolutely.
analogy to a different kind of business. So we think about investments across four categories on that spectrum. So
Okay.
extraction being on one end, where financial returns are prioritized or values aren't
Yes.
considered at all. That's the most extractive. Then we say less extractive, right? So where values are considered, but again, profits, financial returns are maximized.
Hmm.
Third category in that spectrum is what we call restorative, right? That's
Yes.
when values and financial returns are on par with each other when we're making a recommendation to a client.
Mm.
And ultimately, what we would call a regenerative investment is one where values takes more priority over financial return. The JTIC fund would be the
Yes.
example of that, right? So we think about how do we incentivize, encourage, inspire our investors to over time move their portfolios to become more and more regenerative. So,
Right.
if they're an institution, they have $100 million in their endowment, how are they shifting that over time to be 100% regenerative? And again, same
Yes.
idea. You can't go from 0 to 60 in a millisecond. You can't do that.
Right.
but meeting people where they are, where the landscape is, right? Financial system doesn't allow us to do it that fast, right? Because it's
Right.
products, right? But it can be the same thing, let's say, for a car wash, a laundromat. If you
Mhm.
think about on the, both use water, right? On the most extractive side, how much water are you using? What are the industry standards? Are you just there on par?
Right.
And it's like a lot of water. A lot of water. I mean, mind you, of course, we need clean gloves, right? But two, something that is in just on that water issue, because a laundromat or a car wash has multiple value inputs, right? But we're
Mhm.
just talking about water as a resource. And, less extractive, okay, there's maybe some efficiency systems that you've put in, etc. Then on something else is like, wow, like a restorative thing is like you're significantly above industry standards in terms of water efficiency, right?
Yes.
Significantly, 30%. I'm making this up. I don't know
Right.
that, right? But then the last thing is like, whoa, what if a regenerative practice, you don't need to use water at all, right? And again, I don't know these systems. I'm sure there's research
Right.
put into this, right? But you can think about it along those things of like, how do we move? You can think about the same thing with your
Yes.
workers. A lot of places hire, folks and pay them less than the minimum wage. Don't pay them overtime. That's extractive for sure.
Yes.
Less extractive. Okay, I pay them bare minimum.
Right.
Right. I'm following all the laws.
Right.
Following the laws. Plus,
I'm glad you acknowledge that the far end of that spectrum is not even in compliance with the laws. Because
yeah,
that is the reality in so
yeah,
many industries.
yeah. Or they may be in compliance, and then there's gray areas elsewhere, and then they go to
Take
they
advantage
rush
of
to
all
the
of
bottom,
them.
right?
Yes.
And then in same thing, the worker case, right? Something that is restorative might be, oh, they all own a portion of the company. There's some shares, right? Again, one value set. And then maybe the last piece would be, what is the most regenerative? Oh, it's a co-op, for example. Oh, there's an agreement that the owners would only exit to workers in the community. Or there's an agreement that they're going to do a community wealth charter, right? So this idea,
Yeah.
it takes time. We all grew up in capitalism.
Right.
We all grew up with this mindset on TV, our phones, all this thing around. It's important to maximize your money to be safe,
Yes.
right? But again, it goes to the what is enough, right?
Yes.
But it takes time, right?
Right.
And it's a journey. It takes a lot of emotional work,
Yes.
coupled with the
Yeah.
practical work. But yeah,
Just had that conversation yesterday with a client. Yeah, that we can't, and just like we talked about earlier, you can't skip the emotional work that goes into it. Yeah. And the deprogramming, essentially.
it's lifelong, but I would suggest with intentions, the right intentions,
Yeah.
the right community. I mean,
Mhm.
not stopping on both,
Yeah.
right? And we can get there, right?
Yes.
It's something that will be far better than what we're dealing with. And ultimately, I think, you asked me, well, how do you keep doing this? Well, it's about how you want to show up,
Right.
how you want to look at yourself in the mirror. Do you
Exactly.
want to be part of the problem or part of the solution?
Right.
Right? And it's easy for us to wash our hands and give up and say, like, this problem was way too big.
Yeah.
I think we've all been given the gift to make a different kind of choice.
Yes.
Like, that's what being human.
Yes. We ask ourselves that at our company and our team members all the time. How is the world different? Because we showed up at our highest level to do this work.
Yeah. And I think, there's the hard work that we're trying to do, shifting folks' money from extractive to regenerative. But truly, like what I think is it's about the relationships.
Yeah.
It's about the people that we impact that can't be measured,
Yeah.
right? But this idea that, and I hope that this has traction, that if we're making it a little bit less scary,
Yes.
then we're normalizing it.
Right.
And other people will then start to normalize it too. And that in itself, how we relate to each other is how we're changing the world. Now, hopefully, we'll see more how that is actually real in 100 years.
Yes.
Right. But again, it's around how do we want to show up? I would say.
Right. Yeah, and I love it. We're building things and we will see some wins in our lifetime. And some of those wins, will show up for generations after us. And they will be grateful that we spent this time, doing this work.
That's my
So, Alex, you're doing a lot right now. You're teaching, you're building the Just Transition Investing Academy, you're managing Just Futures. So, what is the vision for the next 3 to 5 years? What does success look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it goes again back to normalization and how we're working towards that bigger goal of changing the narrative and changing
Yeah.
relating to each other. Of course, we have AUM goals, we have staff goals, we're trying to grow. That's what makes it more real. If we're growing, that means people are resonating with us. But it
Yes.
truly is a movement. And that's why I'm so privileged to be on this podcast, for you to invite me, to give me space to talk about these things and share out what a lot of folks in my community are talking about and doing the same.
Yes.
You mentioned all these different projects. There's all tons of folks who are working on these things, and this is the
Yeah.
right, this is the ecosystem. So for me, it truly has been a village to get to this point. It's been almost 5 years, right? A lot of folks have helped us along the way, and you're talking about the different projects that we're trying to scale and build, and so our village is growing.
Yes.
That to me is what success looks like, right? The village, both in terms of clients, advisors, fund builders, et cetera, and people resonating with what we're talking about. And I think people are
Yeah.
clamoring for that right now when we're seeing
Very
this
much so.
rise of tech bro, finance bro, billionaire class that is, you know, an oligarchy running our country.
Right.
Are clamoring for something different, and to me, that's what success looks like, is when there's a growing movement of folks across issues, but saying that
Yeah.
something here about the economy is wrong and we need to have something different.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, for everyone listening, if you're taking notes, and I hope you are, here's a bit about what I learned from this conversation. That this was a great reminder that building a business aligned with your values isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. It's about asking who owns this and what is the end impact of what we're doing. Where is the wealth flowing? And it is, Alex, I feel like you really showed us that what it looks like to structure accountability into the DNA of business, which I think is so key, and not as an afterthought, but as foundational ownership, and not impact investing theater, actual redistribution of power. And so if you are a nonprofit leader or you are a small business owner, if you manage a foundation, if you're just a regular person looking for an IRA, Just Futures has something for you if you want to be a part of this movement. I know, especially in these, I struggle to find a word to articulate the times we're in. Tumultuous does not feel like it encompasses truly everything. But everywhere there are so many people who feel overwhelmed and they're not sure how to make a difference, this is a meaningful step that you can take where putting your money where your values lie that will contribute to this movement. And so I encourage you to visit justfutures.com. That's JUST futures.com. And you can check out the options that they have for the different retirement plans. And for everyone that is out there building purpose-driven businesses, Alex's story reminds us that transformation is a dimmer switch, not a light switch, that you don't have to wait for the perfect moment or the perfect model, that you can start where you are, ask who's missing from the table. And if you are in a position of power, challenge yourself to give away more power than might feel comfortable. And when you're facing that choice between conventional success and your actual values, choose your values. Alex, I just want to thank you for doing this work, for your honesty about the contradictions, and for showing us what's possible when you build finance that serves people instead of extraction. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for everything you're doing with your podcast, supporting, social enterprises. And thank you to all the listeners here, for your visionary work. And I'm here. So if folks want to talk offline or whatnot and need support, more than happy to help, because again, this is about building a movement.
Thank you for that. And we will make sure to drop Alex's LinkedIn in the show notes, as well as the links to everything that we discussed about Just Futures, the Movement Trust Partners, the Just Transition Integrated Capital Fund. We'll make sure all of that is listed in the show notes. And if this conversation resonated with you, here's what you can do. Subscribe to the Purpose Profit Shift wherever you listen to your podcast. We've got episodes dropping regularly with more visionary founders and change makers who are reshaping how business gets done. And if you found value in today's episode, leave us a rating and review. It helps other values-driven leaders find us. Until next time, build businesses that matter, build wealth that circulates, and build the economy you want to see. I'm Rachel Bernier Green, and this is the Purpose Profit Shift.
Take care, folks.